live from New York City at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, comments on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Trust every time it is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Thank you once again for sticking with me despite some audio problem we had earlier. Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. You may have received, or you will receive shortly, some announcement that may say something to the effect, if you are white, listen up. Well, let me explain. If you are white and you are an American citizen, or even if you are a permanent resident here in the United States of America, I urge you to pay close attention to this program. This is, I would say, probably the most important program we have had since we started the Fourth Branch project. And the reason for that is because everybody is busy doing their things, and understandably so. Those who are wealthy, very rich, are busy getting richer, getting wealthier. Those who are struggling are busy rushing to work, trying to make ends meet, and those who are in the middle class are busy making certain that they stay middle class or improve a little bit to get to the middle class. As such, it is very difficult to demand that we citizens of this country attend to all, or pay attention rather to everything that's going on. But let me point out something extremely important. A lot of things that are going on in the country deserve a lot of attention. I know there have been what I would call, if depending on which what is your political, if you're a Democrat you feel a certain way, and if you are a Republican you feel a different way, and what ends up happening is every discussion in the country boils down to, it's politics. What I'm about to talk about is not politics. It's life, it's critical, and it impacts society in major ways. In fact, the only thing I can think of that would have such impact in our society, in the world even, was the major war, like World War One, World War Two, Vietnam War, even the small war that we're talking about today, like Iraq War. I said small in comparison, in terms of human casualties. Afghanistan, Iraq War, I consider those wars small, in relatively speaking. Now, I'm not here to talk about war, but I'm here to talk about and I use that as a point of reference to emphasize the importance of the subject. Since actually before the ascension of Donald Trump to the office, you could already see a fissure, using more mundane or frequent term. You could always see the big divide in the country. Of course, the reason most of us don't pay attention is because we've been hearing that for a very long time now, that there is a big divide in the country, and usually it means that it's Democrat fighting Republicans and vice versa. Now, if you've been watching this program, you're probably familiar with a number of controversial issues that I talked about, like war on blacks, homosexuality, and based on feedback that we got here, a number of those who have seen the program once, twice, or decide to no longer pay attention, maybe in their mind they think they hurting us by simply walking away. But what that tells us is the following, that people are looking for places that agree with them, places that support their opinion, their ideology, places that corroborate or strengthen their belief in something. They're not looking for facts, they're not looking for truth. They simply are not concerned enough about where the country is heading for them to pay attention to what's important. There was a time that was the case. Today it seems a very different ballgame. Now, the reason I say, if you're white, listen up. I have written since 2013 about the state of the Republican Party. Now, people start talking about it now as if all of a sudden, because of Donald Trump, the Republican Party has become a haven of racists. And my argument has always been that the Republican Party has been I cannot even use the word gradually, because in the studies, research that we have done here, we went as far back as the Ronald Reagan presidency and walk our way to today to find out the path Republican constituents have been on in order to understand exactly as to where we are going to be maybe a decade or two down the road in terms of the trend. You see, racism is extremely costly. hate other people for no other reason than, superficial, physical characteristic. And I say that is in fact true because usually the people who express, I'll take the elephant in the room, usually the white who hate blacks, they know nothing about the people that they hate. What they do is they have some warped logic that they use in order to bundle every individual in a particular group, and they express their anger towards that group. Joshua claimed that the hatred towards another individual is the greatest danger to a nation, to a society, because it is the maximum of violence towards one individual based exclusively on physical characteristic. Meaning, I went to a room and I express resentment, hatred towards you, knowing absolutely nothing about you, but just by looking at you because of your skin color, and I completely I decided that I like that individual because he's black. And when I say racism is costly, this is not an hyperbole. This is a fact, and I'm gonna provide you a few examples, and I'm gonna try to stay here in the United States and talk about this problem and what I hope white, and that's why I said if you are white, listen up. And I hope that white, there are many categories, and during our conversation about slavery, we talk about all those different categories of individual in the society. We're not gonna go through that again, but we'll bring the example that important enough not only to make the point, but to see how we can manage to save the United States of America. Racism is very costly, and I don't mean that, again, this is not an hyperbole, and this is not just to scare people. It is a fact. Now, I'm going to give you the heaviest toll of racism. Now, World War II, according to historical record, we have anywhere between 74 to 100 some odd million individuals killed in World War II. Yes, you heard millions, yes. Now there are a lot of factors behind that war. And if you've been watching this program, you already know about most of those factors because we talk about those. Adolf Hitler was Chancellor of Germany and became the Führer, and from that point on, everything went awry. But there is one thing, when I mention racism is very costly. Now, this example in particular has nothing to do, well, not exclusively with blacks, has to do with the fact that Adolf Hitler believed that the German race was the purest, and as such, it has to dominate the world and wipe out those he considered worthless. Other races he considered worthless, and one such race was, well, the Jews. Now, we're not here to talk about World War II, but I wanted to put the emphasis on that very fact that I just mentioned, that racism is costly, extremely costly in human lives. It can alter our society, not for the better. So, yes, Adolf Hitler was a dictator. There are plenty today. They crush their own people in the country they rule. They crush the competition, opponents, political opponents, but it is usually something that stay domestic, local. This is not to condone and say it's okay. The point I'm trying to make is, regardless of, we've seen that happen. Bill Clinton did go to you heard of ethnic cleansing, and it's not exclusive to blacks, because every so often you hear in some part of the world that a group feel superior to the other group, to the other ethnic group, and if the group that feels superior happen to be the group in power, that group usually, the people of that group usually use the power to inflict harm on the other group. Racism. And the example I gave you about Adolf Hitler, not that I think that's really what the World War II, because if you've been watching this program, you probably already know about the detail of as to how this whole thing started. In fact, UK declared war to Germany when they found out what was going on. But the bottom line is, Adolf Hitler believed that the Germans were the purest race, and as such, that was his job to cleanse the earth. And even alliances that Adolf Hitler had, such as Italy, was strategic alliance. Adolf Hitler did not have any intention of letting Italy get off the hook, but it was necessary for Adolf Hitler to achieve what he had in mind, and having an alliance with Italy was necessary. But the main point, Adolf Hitler believed that Germany should rule the world because Germans are the pure race. All other races inferior. As such, some will be wiped out of the earth, others will be enslaved to German. Racism. The consequences of that belief, 74 plus million individuals lost their lives in World War II. White, listen up. If you are white and you are a white American, and especially if you live right here in the United States of America, listen up. Because racism is very costly and everybody loses. Now, in any society, you're going to have those type of people. There is absolutely nothing anyone can do to completely erase racism from any country. because there are people who have views that are irrational, but other people, not only they have those views as well, but they would act on those views, which make the racism a very costly sentiment feeling. Adolf Hitler could have felt the way that he felt about the German race, but if he did not go into a trying to conquer the rest of the world because his belief that Germans should rule the world because, you know, the purest race should rule, then World War II may not have happened. Now here in the United States, a couple of days last week, I've been talking almost exclusively about the fact that the Republican Party is a haven for racists and a haven for racists. This is not just a statement, it's a statement of fact. As I mentioned, we've been looking at data for 70 plus years, and the conclusion cannot be, you cannot discard that kind of conclusion. This is how progress made this, we based on scientific data in order to come to a specific conclusion. Now, this is not privy to us here at the Fourth Branch. What has been happening, unfortunately, is the fact that members of the media, politicians, they all have been avoiding talking about it because, you know, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. You may notice that every time a police officer, white police officer, kill an unarmed black man, there is protest on the street, and you have a number of people going on TV and trying to beat the drum about regulation, a way to calm everything down, and then it goes away until the next killing. Now, if you've been watching the past 3+ years, those have been frequent in a conversation, frequent protests, and we've been watching those things pretty much on a regular basis on our screen. But it's not something that happened 3 years ago. It so happened technology, you know, mobile technology, phone with camera, have been helping put that information out. But as far as the country itself, as far as blacks, those are things that have been happening to blacks for a very long time. So the notion of racism in the country has never abated. Today, I've seen a lot of people pointing fingers to Donald Trump as if Donald Trump is a racist. Everybody knows that. We're not here to add our voice to that, because this is not the point of this conversation. It's even redundant to keep saying that, because Donald Trump makes the case for himself that he is racist, and Donald Trump is not racist because he became president. Trump has been racist all his life. He started getting the primer of racism from his father Fred at 17 years old, and he has been practicing those things. So this is nothing new for people living in the world. We always know that Donald Trump is a racist. So we're not here to talk about Donald Trump. You see, there are two very distinct groups of whites in the country, and that has been the case before slavery, during slavery, and after slavery. Nothing has changed. I heard conversation about people thinking there's been progress made. Blacks have said that, white have said that. Me, I've always tell people, progress is very relative. And if I take everything within the context of the conversation, as far as race relation in America, there has not been much progress made at all. In fact, I would say just the opposite has happened. Well, I talk about that. We're not going to dwell on that. I strongly encourage you, if you are interested in this conversation, to go to the People Ranch YouTube channel. And there you'll find video about race relation, war on blacks, racism, and there are tons of video posted about that very topic, because I want to show how costly racism is and how important that whites who do not fall in the wrong category should not be complacent, should not shrug off and walk away, and should not do anything because they're not today victim, because complacency will cost you. As I said, racism is very costly. Now, I showed you on a global basis how the racism of one individual in power, Adolf Hitler, ended up costing the lives of 7 million individuals, people from different parts of the world, including Germans, fighting World War II. Now, back at home, let me tabulate for you something, and then we'll talk about the detail of racism. In World War I, 1914 to 1920, that's when World War I occurred, the United States of America lost 116,516 military armed personnel. 116, almost 117,000. And there were approximately 320,000 people who were sick and wounded, could have died later, but at the time that the tabulation was made, that was the case. World War I, 1914, 1920, the United States of America lost 117,000 soldiers. And 320,000 people, both soldiers and civilian, were either wounded or became sick. Keep that number in mind. World War II, 1938 to 1945. U.S. lost 416,800 armed personnel of 417,000. That 3 times the number of personnel that we lost in World War I. But when you combine military and civilian, the number went to 418,500, almost 419,000 people, between soldiers who fought the war and civilian helping. We lost 419,000 people. Now watch very closely those. It is important to understand that when we as a society do not pay attention to history, when we as a society thinks, oh, this cannot happen, you know that before, because every time something happened, because you heard when there is a mass shooting, starting from Columbine, where the two kids, high school, involved in that first major mass shooting in the United States, people were, oh my God, there's no way in the world we could believe that this thing can happen in our neighborhood. That's always the case. And that kind of statement always come back every day about shooting. In other words, we keep dropping our guard and we keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. That means if you pay no attention, you shrug it off and you think it's not your problem, I guarantee you sooner or later you and all your children, your grandchildren will pay the price. Because there is no escaping that. No matter what you do, there is no escaping it at all. So World War I, we lost 117,000 soldiers plus 320,000 civilian and military personnel were wounded and all became sick. In World War II, we lost 417,000 armed personnel and close to 2,000 civilian also lost their lives. In World War II in particular, as I just explained, a major part of that was because of racism. Now, I say 417,000 armed personnel. Remember, I just mentioned earlier that World War II cost 74 plus million people their lives because of one individual who believed that the German race was the purest, so everybody else has to be wiped out or become slave to German racism. Now the number I'm giving you now is exclusively the United States. So in World War II, the United States lost 417,000 armed personnel and close to 2,000 civilian. Racism. Vietnam War, the United States lost 58,220 people altogether, armed personnel and some civilian, but mostly armed personnel. Iraq War 2003 officially ended 2011. We lost 4,424 armed personnel, 31,952 wounded, military and some civilian. Afghanistan 2001, we lost 2,372 armed personnel, 20,320 wounded. I want you to pause for a moment and I'm going to run down those numbers quickly for you before I give you the last one, if you to get a sense of how costly racism is. Now we're not talking about the world, we're talking about the United States of America. World War I, 117,000 people, armed personnel, people who fought the war, soldiers. The others, the 320,000, were wounded, and those some became sick. Now, again, as I mentioned, usually, sometime that wounded people and sick people may die, but that's not part of the tabulation. World War II, we lost 417,000 armed personnel, close to 2,000 civilians. That particular war point finger almost exclusively to racism. Adolf Hitler, German Chancellor, believed that German were racist, then all other races had to submit to German or wipe out. Vietnam War, we lost 58,000 220 armed personnel, soldiers. Iraq War, we lost 4,424 armed personnel, almost 32,000 wounded. Afghanistan, we lost 2,372 armed personnel, 20,000 were wounded. Now, listen to this. American Civil War, 1861-1865. The country lost 620,000 people and more than 400,000 wounded or sick. Almost 1 million people. None of those wars I just to you, none of them had that number. Even World War II, which took most of our soldiers, which took a great number of our soldiers, were only 417,000. And guess what? World War II lasted 7 years. The Civil War lasted 4 years. Think about that. World War II lasted 7 years, only took 400. When I say only, that's not to minimize the number of people who got killed in that war. Just to make the point. World War II lasted 7 years, and we only lost 417,000 armed personnel. The Civil War lasted 4 years, 3 years less than World War II, and yet we lost more than 500,000 people fighting. 620,000 people, and more than 400,000 were wounded. That's including civilians. Part of the war, but you know, when there is war, there always going to be collateral damage. Civilian, yes, those soldiers fighting as well be wounded or killed. Over 1 million people, over 1 million casualties of war because of one thing: racism, right here in the United States of America. Now, if you were to pause the tape for a moment and go back before 1861, and you were to ask anyone in America whether there would ever be such a war in the country, they all would have said, no way, not in the United States of America. Just like we heard about every time it happened, oh my God, in my neighborhood, that's where the mass shooter come. No, we couldn't possibly, there is no way we could have seen that coming. Yes, there was, but nobody would have ever even fathomed the idea that there would be a war, let alone a war that would cost more than 1 million lives. And yet and that we can put it fully 100% on racism. Yes, racism in America. 620,000 people lost their lives, more than 400,000 were wounded or become sick. Exclusively, there is no other factor, exclusively racism, hatred for blacks. Now, a lot of people believe after the Civil War ended, the Emancipation Act was signed by Abraham Lincoln, and what they construe as progress has happened because there was the Civil Rights Act that says now blacks can vote, blacks can participate in things in the government. They call progress. As I mentioned before, progress of race relations is very relative. As I gave example before, white slave owners used to kill blacks without being held accountable. They didn't have to say anything. They could. Today, police officer killed blacks. That tend to do something, but follow all the police officers who have killed black people and see what happened. 97% of them just walk away free of charge. Nothing has changed. The progress is very psychological. I've always talked about that and I always mention it. Now, white people, as I mentioned before, I'm well aware that there are millions of white people who are not racist. I'm aware of that. And that is not something today, it has always been the case. During slavery, it was that way. Before slavery, it was that way. During slavery, it was that way. Before slavery, it is still that way. During the time I was talking about the period of slavery, I gave plenty of examples of such, that the country has always been, in terms of race relation, in the white community into. There are millions of whites who are not racist, who do not discriminate, who consider everyone on merit. There are also equally millions of others who are racist, who are bigots, and who would do everything to prevent blacks' advancement, and who would put stumbling blocks for blacks, and who would hurt blacks every chance that they have. This is the dilemma we have. Donald Trump did not create that. He certainly took advantage of it. He certainly exacerbated the situation. But Donald Trump, people keep looking at Donald Trump and they keep missing the bigger picture, and which would cause major problem in the future here in America. Because just like we always say, we didn't think that can happen in our neighborhood, we didn't think so and so who seemed to be a good boy, who seemed to be very polite, he happened to be a mass murderer. America, that the trend we in is nothing new in the history of this country. And you see the Republican senators where people are shocked because they think, oh my God, I understand that there will be a free French French element of the Republican Party, just that there are in the constituent side, there would be some of those, because hey, this is a society, we have people, some are really crazy lunatic, so you would expect that. But no one expected the whole Republican Party or the party to be that way. But this is no surprise to me. If you go right before the Civil War, you will find that there were many senators who chose to go on the side of fighting against the Union. In fact, one such senator, Jefferson Davis, volunteered himself to become the president of the state that wanted to secede from the country. They have always been that way. People who are racist, racism begets racism. So white people, especially those who are not racist, those who understand the danger of racism, my warning to you is this: doing nothing, saying nothing, does not help. Doing nothing, saying nothing, put you exactly in the same danger as those hated by the other side. In fact, I gave such example during slavery time. White people who actually got killed along with blacks who trying to flee slavery, to fled slavery. So the idea that it's wrong, I want you to rethink that strategy. It's not going to work. Because the trend we're on rather, if we continue to be the idea that we could see ourselves in another civil war may sound far-fetched to you, but it's not. Except for this time, it will be bloodier than the first time. And I'll explain why. You see, the first time in 1861, when the American Civil War started, only whites had the privilege of having weapons. Blacks were mostly helping the process along. In fact, even in the state that wanted to keep slavery, blacks were forced to help out with the war. This time, it's different. Blacks own weapons. Blacks are in the military. They know how to shoot. And there are plenty of numbers, and of course, side by side with the white, the casualties would probably surpass everything that we've seen so far in war. And you think it's impossible to happen? You're not paying attention? The whole Republican Party, and we're not talking about constituents talking on the street. We're talking about senators, congressmen, and women in Washington. They all siding with an individual whose major weapon is, and you're not seeing any one of them making any pushback, saying no, that's not acceptable. They're all okay with it. And you think it's important? The American Civil War started. Of course, nobody expects you to know everything about the history of the country. A vague idea that it was slavery and they were fighting against slavery. But the detail should give you pause. That you have senators, people you expect that would have a brain to think, oh my God, what are we doing? No, they weren't. They were the same people who decided, let's fight to keep slavery around. The end result, 620,000 people lost their lives, 400,000+ people were wounded or became sick. Without Jefferson Davis, who volunteered to be the president leading the charge, without all the senators who joined in order to facilitate the war, then we would not have that problem. So don't rely on Republican senators or congressmen to help prevent that from happening. They were there before, they are exactly the same way they're acting today. Nothing has changed. I feel both saddened and sometimes I find it funny that people here in the United States think that Republicans, there's going to be a time when Republicans think enough is enough. You're gravely mistaken. The American Civil War happened is because that time never came. In fact, behind the scene, most of those legislators were plotting to be on the side fighting to keep slavery around. And you think they're going to change their mind? Have you been watching lately what's going on? The guardrail of our democracy have already been removed, and the Republicans are fine with that. The Republican legislators, whose primary job is to prevent those guardrails from being removed, they actually help remove those guardrails. And you think they would do something? There would come a time they would do something? No, because they too are racist. So when Donald Trump speaks the way they speak, they cannot condemn him because they actually want someone who represents their view to speak the way that they feel. Republican constituent interviewed that very topic say that's the reason we voted Donald Trump in office. So both the constituent and the legislators, Republican legislators in Washington, they feel exactly the same way Donald Trump is expressing himself. Because as I mentioned before, the Republican Party is a haven of racists and a haven for racists. So if you sit there and think at some point those individuals would have a change of heart and would help save the country, you must also believe in Bigfoot. They're going to. We've seen that movie before. They are the same people who push until we get to the Civil War. They're not going to change. Now, the mistake that our society has made is instead of putting the whole thing on display, they keep dancing around the issue. They don't want to call the devil by their name, by its name. The Republican Party is a haven for racists. And we keep dancing around saying that, and they keep chugging along and taking the country down a path which later on we would say, if only. I have no doubt in my mind that those people, those Republican legislators in Washington, they in sync with Donald Trump. They're not saying anything, they're not condemning it, because they too feel exactly the same way. They are racist. How could you condemn something you agree with? That's why you see them explaining it away, not condemning it. I don't even know why the reporters waste their time asking that question. They will explain away, defend, shield, because Donald Trump speaks the language that they want to speak, behave the way that they want to behave. They see in Donald Trump exactly the leaders they've always wanted. Someone who is racist, who tries to do without flinching, without worrying, because that's exactly the way that the Republican legislators in Washington feel. And if you
who do not feel the same way, and you think not doing anything, things will just work itself out? I'm here to tell you it didn't work that way before. And I doubt it will work this way again. We have a crisis in America, and it is not a crisis that was caused by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has exacerbated the situation, as I said, but Donald Trump did not cause that crisis. Republicans felt that they could not express themselves publicly, they could not display their racism, but Donald Trump opened the door for them to do so. That's all Donald Trump did. But nothing that Donald Trump did caused those individuals already racist. Donald Trump simply opened the door for them to be on display. So if you are white and you are not racist, as I always say, and I say it again, even during slavery, there were millions of whites who were not racist, who did not approve of slavery, who did not participate, who were against it. That's the way it has always been in the United States. Today, almost certain those who are racist, who continue to practice racism, descendant of those who were during the slavery. So they continue the practice. Nothing will change. If you think that Republican legislators are going to change, and it is not politics, they want to frame it as politics. This is not politics. Racism is costly. And my warning to you, whites who are not racist, you cannot not say anything. You cannot shrug it off. You cannot walk away because it doesn't concern you. More than 1 million people lost their lives or became ill or wounded in the American Civil War. What are the chances that if something similar happened, that you or your loved one would not be victimized? Prevention is the best medicine. Today, we have the whole Republican Party a haven for racists, haven of racists. And if those who understand the situation, whites, who know people who are racist, who are proper racist, who are implementing racism, whether it's at the workplace or no matter where you're at, being silent would not spare you. When Adolf Hitler implemented its strategy of racism against the rest of the world, 74+ million people lost their lives. You see, racism is costly. Doing nothing is not a solution and cannot be considered a strategy either, because sooner or later, if it's not you, your children, your grandchildren will have to face the reality of exactly the consequences of racism in America. you for spending the time with me. We will come back in an hour to continue with the reading of the Mueller report. I hope this was important to you. Information was of some use to you. If not, you already know what to do. Send us your comments, suggestion, criticism. Let us know how to do it better. As I say, the program is not going anywhere. You might as well help make it better. In the meantime, if you have a particular topic you would like us to talk about, send it to us. We will research it, we will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope to see you again in 1 hour for the reading of the Mueller report. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the day. That was an update through the prism of science. Join us again at the top of the hour. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. See you in just a bit.
The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.